The Holy Gospel according to Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Appoint us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We're able." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to appoint, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. Instead, whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Well, in our gospel text today, the idea is continued about how we should proceed in looking for a place in the kingdom. Jesus reiterates the gospel and kingdom principle that the greatest in the kingdom are those who serve. James and John, indeed all the disciples, expect Jesus to establish an earthly kingdom, maybe very soon, in their eyes, in Jerusalem, in the ancient world. We often look at the brother's request as something inappropriate. However, loyal friends and disciples, followers, who shared in a presumptive ruler's dangers had somehow earned the right to ask for special favors. James and John aren't doing anything out of the ordinary in the first century. Sitting on either side of a ruler was considered the highest level of dignity in any kingdom. James and John want to sit on the right hand and the left hand of Jesus when Jesus comes into his kingdom, into his glory, they said. They haven't learned anything. They're still expecting a messianic kingdom based on force and power. In fact, the brothers' request is a bit similar to Herod's offer to his stepdaughter, the daughter of Herodias, back in chapter 6, verse 22. When they want to sit on the right hand, this is the place of greatest authority and honor. The left hand, of course, is second. But then Jesus asked them if they can drink the cup set before him, and if they can abide the baptism with which Jesus will be baptized. The Hebrew prophets often used a cup to symbolize sufferings. And here it applies to Jesus' own painful and frankly humiliating death. Same goes for baptism. Jesus would be baptized in his own blood and suffering. The brothers, like Simon Peter later on, they're extremely confident of their ability to follow Jesus. Even when the persecutions follow, they say, "Yeah, we can do it. We'll be there." Simon Peter said, "I'll never deny you." As we know, all three of them, indeed all of the disciples, fled at the time of greatest testing. Indeed, James and John did drink that cup of suffering. They did undergo that baptism. Before any of the 12 were martyred, It was James who was the first to be put to death, as we see in Acts chapter 12, verse 2. John, on the other hand, suffers differently. He outlived all the other apostles. His suffering wasn't immediate death and martyrdom, but was a suffering of outlasting everyone else by decades. It's a sad thing for us when we outlive loved ones, friends, spouses, brothers, sisters, certainly mother and father. To be left without them is a different kind of suffering altogether. It's extraordinarily painful. Wouldn't wish that on anybody. So James becomes the first one to be put to death among the 12, forgetting about Judas Iscariot, who took his own life. James is the first to be martyred. And John, his suffering is to outlive everyone by decades. He outlives Jesus by 6 or 7 decades. Simon Peter by what? 4 decades. James, his own brother, by 6 or 7 decades. Just as Jesus told them that they would drink of that cup and undergo that baptism, so did they suffer, but very different ends. The bitingly ironic image that follows is that the ones who would be at the right hand and left hand of Jesus were in fact none other than the 2 criminals who were crucified with Jesus on his right hand and his left hand, one of whom mocks Jesus. Now, the other disciples, of course, get pretty angry about this. They're pretty upset with the brothers. So Jesus calls the disciples together and said, look, it's the Gentiles who lord authority over their subjects. They become tyrants. Then Jesus accurately depicts the quest for power in the ancient Mediterranean world, beginning with the emperors and on down the ladder. Everyone is clawing over each other, trying to climb over each other. The Jewish rabbis, especially the first century, were fond of using Gentiles as negative examples. And that's what Jesus is doing here, saying, this is how the Gentiles do it, but this is not how we do it. Jesus' teachings actually violated the expectations of honor and authority in the ancient world. It is indeed the world turned upside down. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher of the 19th century, hated this aspect of Christianity, the willing abdication of power. Even into the modern world, the quest for power has always been at the center of social progress. Jesus reverses all of that. To be great, I must serve. In fact, our translation even says you must be a slave to all. Surrender your rights. Surrender any authority you might think you have. To be great, I must serve. To be honored, I must be debased. Jesus spells it out, that the Son of Man, the one with all power and authority, who is expected to reign, actually came as a servant who would give his life for others. This is Jesus' own definition of his ministry. The ransom, well, that's of course the money paid or an object traded to buy the release of someone being held captive. When Jesus entered into Jerusalem, the crowd shouted, Hosanna, Aramaic for rescue us. Jesus' ministry, in fact, brings about the rescue of humanity. Rescued from sin, rescued from psychological oppression, rescued from ourselves. Thanks be to God.